Well, welcome to the Janelle King Show. I'm Janelle King, and this is Extra 106.3. And for all of my new listeners who are joining me for the first time at our new time, this is where we discuss kitchen table topics that are typically banned from family gatherings but are absolutely necessary in order to have a strong republic. And the truth is, I'm not one to bite my tongue. It's just not my style. But sometimes it can be hard to get it all in 30-second news clips, which is why I love having my show where I can dig deeper into some of these important topics. So thank you so much for joining us. Another jam-packed show today. Table topic for today: Trump's tariffs and the overhaul of welfare. So we're going to discuss some of the tariffs conversation, and I have some facts that was sent to me from the Trump team, so we can really kind of dive into the tariff conversation. We're going to do that in this first segment, and then I'm going to follow it up with the overhaul of welfare. We got to talk about what's happening to welfare, but I really want to go back into like its original intent. I want to talk about what happens when we misuse government assistance, as well as what is Trump actually saying, because there's so much misinformation. And then what's a good plan for those who will be or could be affected by the adjustments that are coming. But first, let's get my take on some of these current events. So there was a public viewing held recently for Mr. Cornelius Taylor. Mr. Taylor lost his life tragically during a homeless encampment sweep in Atlanta. The incident has sparked significant backlash regarding the city's approach to homelessness. On January 16th, Taylor died during the clearing operation by the Atlanta Public Works crew near the King Center. While initial police reports indicate that Taylor died from an overdose, the family's attorneys claim that the autopsy revealed he suffered from severe injuries from heavy machinery, including a trigger warning, it's a little harsh, but including a split pelvis and crushed organs. In response to Taylor's death, community advocates are demanding an end to encampment sweeps and are advocating for a housing first approach that prioritizes long-term housing solutions for the unhoused. But that's what the left is saying, but I'm going to call it what it is: for the homeless. The community is determined to ensure that Taylor's death leads to meaningful reforms in the city's homeless strategy. This was interesting to me because, first of all, this, in my opinion, while it is a issue here in Georgia, had this been a cleanup that was done by the governor's office, the state of Georgia, I can totally see them making it racial. And I could totally see them making it about something that has nothing to do with what's actually happened. Now, I know the autopsy said one thing, I know the family saying another thing, and all this other thing, but I think two things can be true at the same time. Mr. Taylor could have been dealing with a addiction, and he could have overdosed and fell asleep or whatnot, and just that's why he didn't hear the heavy machinery and equipment moving. Who knows? But either way, I just know in my heart that this issue would have been blown out of the water if it was the state of Georgia issue. And lastly, as I'm looking at all the pictures from the funeral and considering the fact that there was a sitting U.S. senator who gave the eulogy, not to mention the hundreds of people who were marching on behalf of Mr. Taylor, I couldn't help but ask myself, where were all these people when he was living in the encampment? Why is the advocating for better housing and better solutions taking place now? I have to ask these questions. It just seems like it's something else. And I understand that the city is trying to clean up its public perception and the image and all that good stuff. So I kind of understand why the city is doing certain things, but I really wonder if the fight that's coming from all of these family and friends who have come out to support him, if the fight for Mr. Taylor's life and him getting off of drugs or him not being homeless as a community, as a family, I wonder if that fight was as strong as the fight for his rights that they're fighting for right now after his life. Just wondering. Moving on. Let's talk about tariffs. I want to give you some facts surrounding Trump's tariff plan, as there has been a lot of misinformation. First, President Trump has declared a national emergency due to the threat posed by illegal immigration and drug trafficking. So let's just make sure we cite the facts, specifically fentanyl, okay? So let's just connect the dots here. These tariffs has a lot to do with the border. There's a lot to do with President Biden leaving the border wide open, okay? His tariffs consist of a 25% additional tariff on imports from Canada and Mexico, and a 10% additional tariff on imports from China, with a lower 10% tariff on energy resources from Canada. The orders highlight the national emergency related to the influx of contraband drugs and the associated public health crisis with Canadian and Mexican cartels have been mentioned as well. The administration has reason to believe the Mexican government provides safe havens for drug cartels, contributing to a rise in drug-related overdose deaths in the United States. And there is a stated growing presence of Mexican cartels operating fentanyl production labs in Canada. So there's a connection between Mexico and Canada, raising concerns about increased domestic production. Previous administrations, which I think we can say that was Biden, so the previous administration failed to leverage the economic influence to address border security and drug issues effectively. The current tariffs are seen as a tool to enhance national security. Trade constitutes a significant portion of the GDP for Canada as well as Mexico, while being a smaller percentage of the United States GDP. The Trump administration argues that the current influx of illegal aliens under the Biden administration has resulted in a border crisis, affecting various aspects of American life, including schools, housing, and public safety. Over 21,000 pounds of fentanyl was apprehended at the United States border in this last fiscal year. Guys, 21,000 pounds. And then there was an estimated 75,000 deaths per year are attributed to fentanyl overdoses. 75,000 deaths. Wow. So the what President Trump and the administration is doing, the tariffs they're going to be able to negotiate favorable terms and address various international challenges, including intellectual property theft and trade imbalances with China. So China is kind of like a different issue here, right? So we have Mexico, we have Canada, who are having major issues because they are just protecting the cartel. But then you have China, who we have some intellectual property disputes with, as well as some trade imbalances, right? So we know we've always had issues with China and their tariffs and all that good stuff. So I'm not too surprised. Tariffs, and I want to make sure we keep this in mind, because I think it's something that gets lost a lot, is that I don't think a lot of people understand what tariffs are and what it means. But tariffs are taxes for the international market. It's like paying a toll fee for your goods and services, particularly it's like you're paying the toll fee to allow your goods and services to cross over into international borders. And it's mostly misunderstood simply because there are very few that understand the effects of it. The truth is, tariffs cause a slowdown economically, no matter what or how you're doing it or why you're doing it, right? It's going to cause a slowdown. But what you have to ask yourself is this slowdown here to calibrate the economy and get us back on track so that we can then start going up and moving in the right direction? Or is the slowdown simply because of poor financial management that's going to lead us into inflation, in a depression or a recession that will lead us in the opposite direction. So it's, am I going to slow the economy down for a quick second, or put kind of like a emergency brake on the economy to a certain degree, not completely, but just, slowing it down a bit, just so that we can enact these tariffs and get this in order so that we can head in the right direction? Or are we going to not do this and then continue to go in the wrong direction? So I support tariffs as of right now. I do support the tariffs that President Trump is putting in place, because I can't support America being in debt and then somehow finding a way to give credits and assistance to other countries. That always makes me a little weird, right? It makes me feel a little bizarre. So for me, I want to make sure that we are stabilizing our economy first. I want to make sure that we are putting our country in the best position possible so that we can then go and help others. If we are in debt, if we are in a potential economic crisis, how can we help other people? All right, when we return from the break, I am going to dive into this overhaul that America is experiencing as it relates to our current welfare programs. Are they ending food stamps? What about Medicaid? And our seniors? What's going to happen? So much fear and yet so much optimism in the same room. We're going to break it all down. You're listening to The Janelle King Show right here on Extra 106.3. We'll be right back.
Hello, everyone. My name is Suzanne Guy, and this is the Church's Moment. There is an incredible opportunity to start a distinct pro-life ministry at your church. We started one at our church about 5 years ago, and the fruit has been tangibly beautiful. We do monthly meetings that educate and equip the body of believers on sanctity of human life issues from womb to tomb by bringing in and featuring different pro-life leaders from all over Georgia, as well as featuring different ministries like post-abortion healing ministries or foster care ministries. There are so many great community partners out there. And then the second part of this pro-life ministry is having a care team. This is an opportunity to show moms in crisis, moms in unplanned, unwanted, or crisis pregnancies, that the church is the place to run to, that the church is a safe haven and a place to go for tangible help, real hope, true compassion, friendship, and discipleship. And yes, an opportunity to share the gospel in both word and deed. Brothers and sisters in Christ, will you consider starting a distinct pro-life ministry at your church? It's so easy. Please contact me today to find out how simple this is. You can contact me at my email, proverbs31:8@att.net. This is the Church's Moment.
Welcome back to the Janelle King Show. I'm Janelle King, and this is Extra 106.3. And for my new listeners at my new time, this is where we discuss kitchen table topics that are typically banned from family gatherings, but are absolutely necessary in order to have a strong republic. And today's table topic is Trump's tariffs and the overhaul of welfare. Now, before the break, we discussed some current events, some current topics, and now I want to talk about what's happening with our federal welfare program, because I think it's important to really address this. So if you miss our conversation on tariffs, we talked about that in the last segment. Don't worry at all. We will have additional opportunities for you to be able to hear the playback. So for the past 2 weeks, I've heard so much information surrounding President Trump's revamping of of welfare programs and our welfare programs, but I have also heard some things that is not going over as well. But has it even happened? What is going on, right? What's really going on with all of this conversation and all the good stuff? So most importantly, there are more who have no clue about America's safety nets. So I thought it was best to first start by discussing the original intent of safety nets in America before we discuss what is happening today, because I think a lot of what's happening today, a lot of the emotions associated with today, is because a lot of people don't understand the original intent of our social safety nets. So our America's social safety nets was originally designed to meet basic needs, specifically targeting poverty in healthcare. And it all began in the 1930s when social safety nets started to emerge. Now, before the 1930s and before we had social safety nets, states were responsible for assisting their own poor population. So there wasn't a federal response. There wasn't federal dollars that you can get. The states had to figure it out amongst their community. But the Great Depression marked a significant turning point, shifting assistance from a state focused approach to the federal program. Today, from a state focus to a federal focus. And today we have about 11% of men, about 13% of women utilize these safety nets. And if you want to break it down by ethnicity, you see about 10% of whites and Asians use them, while 18% of Hispanics, 20% of blacks, and 25% of Native Americans rely on these programs. The overarching social safety net is TANF, which is supposed to be about temporary relief, which was intended to provide this temporary relief for the elderly or those who are unable to work. However, the current reality has strayed far from these original criteria points. Social Security is another program which is under scrutiny. Unlike TANF, Social Security is a contributory program, not a means tested program. In other words, TANF, which is where you find food stamps and other type of social safety nets for those who are in need. TANF is for people who have to be means tested. So basically they have to see that you absolutely need this in order to utilize it, or they're supposed to. Whereas Social Security is something we all pay into, we contribute to that program, functioning based on income and serving as both a life insurance as well as financial assistance. Now, social safety nets can constitute the federal government's largest budget item and are funded through payroll taxes, which are deducted from everybody's paychecks. In 2022, the percentage of payroll taxes paid to the government for Social Security was around 6.2%, which was then matched by employers. Now, if you're self-employed, then that means that you have to bear the weight of the full percentage, that 12.4. So you have to now bear the entire weight of it, because you're self-employed. The dynamics of paying into Social Security create an interesting debate. So critics argue that while wealthier individuals may receive larger benefit checks than those on the lower income spectrum, for instance, a person earning $30,000 a year could receive $15,000 in benefits, while someone making $120,000 a year could get $30,000 in benefits. So it's clearly you pay more, you get more, right? But where it balances out is that in most cases, lower income recipients tend to use the program for extended periods of time, thus receiving more than they pay into. So they're getting more, but paying in less. So that's kind of how it balances out. This whole entire topic of entitlements and welfare is often referred to as the third rail of politics, which is akin to the third rail of the railway system, suggesting that it's both a necessity, but also very, very dangerous to touch, because that third rail is typically really, really hot. But changes are on the horizon, driven by several pressing reasons. One being the overwhelming of the system, which poses significant pressure, particularly as World War II baby boomers are now starting to retire. They're reaching these retirement ages and they're ready to clock out, okay? And mind you, they have paid into this system. Another issue is that there are fewer younger people who are paying into Social Security, creating a looming crisis. For example, in 1940, 40 able-bodied workers covered one person on welfare, but that ratio has now dropped to just 3 and 1. So 40 people to 1 now is 3 to 1. And then you wonder why our system is so strained. Another issue is that the original design of safety nets doesn't apply as intended today. The safety net was supposed to be one leg of a three-legged stool. You have your Social Security, but then you also have your personal savings and possibly private pensions. But unfortunately, many individuals today are lacking savings, and these nets are now expected to supplement what's missing. Moreover, people are also living longer, which leads to further complications to the equation. In 2019, the total spending for the country was around 4.4 trillion, and 2.64 trillion was dedicated to safety nets. So we're talking about over half of our total spending in 1 year goes towards safety nets. This is why I truly believe that we are living in a communist system. I know we're still a republic. We have to be a republic. I know all that. But we have been heading in the wrong direction because way too many people are depending on the government. And that is an indicator that we are definitely sneaking up on some communistic ways. However, the most significant threat may lie in the projection that the system could hit insolvency by 2035. What does insolvency mean? It means that we're looking at running out of money by 2035. And as you look ahead, it is crucial to address these major challenges and consider, how do we best adapt to these systems? How do we best adjust them in order to make sure that we're still able to help the elderly, still able to help those who can't help themselves, but also we're not putting a strain on the system? This is why I believe that one of the biggest issues that we're facing today is the divide generationally. I can't tell you how many times I've heard young people say things like, I'm fighting for the increase of social safety nets. We want Medicare for all. We want universal health care. We want school to be free. I mean, they want the government to pay for everything, while in the same breath, I hear these young people criticizing the older generation for working 40 years at a job that they may not have loved. The fact is, in order to increase government support, you must be willing to pay into the system to sustain it. Now that we understand the origin of the welfare system in America, what is Trump saying today? What is happening today? Well, the administration has begun discussions regarding potential overhauls of Medicaid, food stamps, and other federal safety net programs. Options being considered include new work requirements, amen, and spending caps for these programs. Let me say something about these work requirements. I've already heard people say things about like working 30 hours a week, and I think that's being thrown around, but I haven't seen enough to say that that's what it's going to be. But I will say this. I find it quite fascinating that we are discussing why it should be why someone who's receiving government assistance should also be able to work at least part-time. I don't understand taking work requirements away in the first place. I was listening to a woman talk about how she was excited that work requirements may be added to the system because she said she was tired of sneaking around, having a job, and still finding herself in a situation where she still needs government assistance because her money, her job is part-time, but it's, she's trying to actually get out of poverty, and she's doing things. She's trying to go to school. She's trying to do stuff, right? So when you have someone who's trying to do things to get out of poverty, and they just need a little bit of help, that's what these programs are supposed to be for anyway. So I absolutely think we should have work requirements, but there's also talk about having spending gaps on these programs in addition to the work requirements that are being discussed, as well as to adjust SNAP benefits, which may potentially reduce costs by tens of billions of dollars. Proposals to restrict The types of food eligible for purchase with SNAP benefits has also been suggested. Amen. Like, why are we purchasing Cheetos? Oh my gosh, when your money can go so much further with produce. Anyway, during Trump's first administration, work requirements for Medicaid were allowed in several states, leading to significant enrollment declines. But the Biden administration rescinded these approvals. So now they were like, oh no, you don't have to go to work. We'll take care of you. Anyway, the overarching goal of these proposed changes is to effectively manage federal spending while continuing to address the healthcare needs of low-income individuals. The fact of the matter is, having a better understanding of the origin of our entitlement programs, you should better understand why the Trump administration has to make these changes, especially when you consider that Social Security is looking like it's going to run dry by 2035. And then the fact that there's so few people paying into the system and young people who feel like they're above working, so they don't want to pay into the system, yet they want to advocate for the system to continue to pay for things. Anyway, not to mention the fact that we have so many people utilizing these benefits, such as the 60 million Medicaid recipients to our 1.1 million physicians. So what happens to all of us when assistance is misused, when it's misallocated? I mean, when it's just completely not going to the right people? Well, first, there's an increased financial burden that we have to discuss. It's going to be an increased financial burden on all of us, because the only way to fix it is either to raise taxes or to print more money. Both of those impact us negatively. Raising taxes means that you bring home less money for your family because you're sending more money to the government to pay for other people's families, or, which is okay if the people actually need it. On the conversation, we'll get to that. Or it's going to impact you in another way, which means that if the government decides to start printing money, that means the value of the dollar is going to devalue, which means inflation is on the way, which then means the cost of services and foods and products and all this stuff is going to be higher, thus impacting all of us. So when we misuse these funds, when we see people misusing these funds, when we don't care if people are misusing these funds, you're basically saying, I don't care if you are robbing me. That's basically what you're saying, because the increased financial burden is major. Also, you may have to consider the fact that resources may become overstretched or lead to reduced availability for those who truly rely on food assistance for survival. So when you have those people who really, really need it, they're going to get less than what they really need because the program is stretched. The money is not there. Strain on local food banks and charitable organizations also are something that we have to consider due to an increased demand of essential resources that are being depleted. And then lastly, but not least, I do have one more, but close to last, the erosion of trust in social assistance programs. When public perception grows and the resources are misallocated, people stop trusting the program, and they think that it's now becoming a harm. Lastly, you can expect delayed or reduced access for individuals and families who legitimately qualify for assistance, which means more and more people in need and more government spending is going to be needed to make up for what is not being added by us who are paying into the system. Okay? So that goes back to the printing of money, the creation of more problems. So now that we've discussed this in depth, I have to add a few things. The response from the Black community is baffling to me. Now, I can't agree with this notion that white people utilize the system more than Black people. I used to, but I really can't. But white people make up majority of our population, but they only make up about 10% of the welfare program. Whereas Black people make up about 13% of the population, but we make up 20% of the welfare program. Okay? So we can't say that there are more white people on it than black people, because when you think about it in its totality and you really break it down and really look at the data points, that's not true. That's not actually accurate. So, but it is baffling to me that they're having this response, considering the fact that I don't see this same emotional response when it comes to poor school systems, when it comes to misplaced priorities, the lack of strong cultural priorities. I was talking to my husband the other day, and I said to him, as we were riding through the city and we saw this grown black man like pretending to shoot a basketball while he was pumping gas. And I said to my husband, I was like, man, like, was it every black guy's dream to be an athlete or entertainer? And, and this is coming from my husband was an athlete, but and I said to him, I said, man, it's just so difficult. And I was like, and then the number of people who are not putting in the effort to become great at the skill, right? The number of people who are, really concerned, that are not putting in the effort, like we saw Michael Jordan do, or Kobe Bryant, or even LeBron James. Like they practice a lot. We're not seeing that as much. And so my husband said something that was really fascinating. He said, yeah, but it doesn't really matter. I mean, you can work as hard as you want. We're talking about 1 million people trying to get a handful of slots. It's just not possible. So why is athleticism or entertainment such a high cultural priority in the black community, when in fact it is virtually impossible for everyone who's pursuing it to become a professional athlete? So we have to address that. I want the same emotional response to these misplaced priorities and all the other issues that we can control in our community. Because the fact of the matter is that safety nets are just that. They're safety nets, which is a safeguard against possible hardship or adversity. The plan is what was never to have the safety net as something you rely on. It's supposed to be something that is just present just in case. So the only reliance is if I happen to need it, if I happen to fall into it, I know it'll be there to catch me. But then it should, just like those safety nets that are attached to the bottom of the acrobats, when they fall in that net, they jump right back up. And that's what the net should be doing. But you're not supposed to fall into the net and then turn over and get tucked in and say, I'm going to stay in the safety net. Anyway, moving on. I have a heartfelt message for those who are feeling the emotional stress of all the movement that's going on in the government, and just keeping in mind that change is never easy. And in some cases, considering the alternative is much scarier. You're listening to The Janelle King Show. I'm Janelle King. This is Extra 106.3. We'll be right back. This is The Janelle King Show right here on Extra 106.3, where we discuss kitchen table topics that are typically banned from family gatherings, but are absolutely necessary in order to have a strong republic. And if you're joining us for the first time, don't worry. You can catch an encore episode tomorrow at 9 a.m. right here on Extra 106.3. And remember, our podcast drops every Tuesday wherever you get your podcast. And if you're feeling eager, you can watch the video podcast right now on YouTube. Just remember to subscribe to our YouTube and Rumble pages, and your likes, comments, and shares are always welcomed. Now grab a seat and let's get back to the table. Today's kitchen table topic is Trump's tariffs and overhauling welfare. And before the break, we did talk about the tariffs, and I kind of broke down the origin of our safety net system in America, as well as talking about some of the stuff that President Trump has going on and why we should not be as concerned. But at the same time, if there are going to be adjustments, we do need to be prepared for it. It's particularly those that will be impacted. But I wanted to make sure I explained why the adjustments are necessary, because I don't think a lot of people know that we are looking at a possible depletion of funds as it relates to our Social Security account by 2035. So I wanted to close with a message for those who are concerned about how this will impact their current situation. And I want to start by saying, I'm sorry. I am so sorry, because the government has failed you. And I'm not talking about what's happening right now. I'm talking about the fact that the government has placed so many into a position of government dependency. It's just not fair. It's not right. And if we go all the way back to LBJ, who knew that government dependence would lead to financial dependence, which would ultimately ensure political dependence, so much so that we have people crying and defending the need for government dependence. For many who say that this change has been life altering or it is life altering, I say ride the wave. Life will open up in ways that you have no clue existed. Sometimes pulling that crutch, pulling out that safety net, sometimes it does lead to you realizing that all you have to do is stand up. It's kind of like being in shallow water and you think that you're drowning and then the lifeguard is screaming, stand up, just stand up. You're not drowning. That to me is what I believe this could be. If President Trump puts these restrictions on the welfare system that now requires people to go to work, requires you to participate, to pay into the system, I'm telling you, it's going to do so much. Your creativity will explode. Determination and persistence will move into your house. And confidence, self-assurance, and just knowing that you have all that you need to be successful will truly carry you through these difficult times. It is possible. I'm speaking from experience because I understand what it's like to have to really figure it out. But I know you can. And I want to encourage rather than beat anyone down or make fun. And I see a lot of stuff going on. The fact of the matter is, it doesn't have to be that hard. But you have to embrace what is happening. You have to embrace the opportunity to build something for yourself. Take a thorough examination of your life, meaning write down every expense that you have, lights, gas, hair, eating out, etc. And decide what is a need and what is a want. Because like, for example, you need to eat. You need to have a roof over your head. But you want to eat at restaurants and you want to live in the most luxurious spot. Something that was so encouraging is I saw a lady, a couple of people actually are doing this. I saw someone put up a video on TikTok, or I think it was TikTok. No, I'm not on TikTok, so it had to be IG. But she put up a video and she was talking about how she turned her 1-bedroom apartment into a pretty cute studio apartment, style apartment for her and her kids to save money. And she was like, I'm now able to do more things because I'm not paying for a 2-bedroom or a 3-bedroom because I want my kids to all have a bedroom and they're small kids. So being creative and having those creative juices flowing to teach you how to make better financial decisions, those are the type of things that come out of this. And it's probably a better financial decision anyway to purchase groceries to eat at home than it is to go out to eat. It's a need to have gas in your car for work. It's a want to use that gas that could be for the entire week on going out or being in the streets. It's totally different. Keeping in mind that this is not a judgment on anyone, because I'm speaking again from experience, having had to tackle my own relationship with spending, my own relationship with finances, and being creative when looking for work and utilizing all these different avenues that are now presenting itself. That's what comes out of these hardships. When COVID hit and we reopened, there were so many restaurants that were looking for employees. They were looking for workers. And I said to my husband, if I was homeless, if I was living on the streets right now and I was in my right mind, just fell on hard times, right? So I wasn't addicted to drugs. I don't have any type of psychological issues, but I just fell on hard times and now I found myself sleeping in my car. This would be my moment. This would be my moment. That's what I thought during COVID. when businesses were starting to reopen. If it was up to me, I would find a facility, go get cleaned up. I would then pull myself together, and then I would ask if I can work at every restaurant within a walking radius. And at this point, these business owners, they're not looking for an act of God. They're looking for people who they can depend on, people who they can work with, and that I know that they would have been willing to work with my schedule. So if you could be somebody they can count on and do well, opportunity is there. And the fact of the matter is, you could have negotiated like, hey, I can come in from, 7 to close, or even I can come in before it opens up and get things ready, do some type of prep work. There's so much negotiation that could happen during this time, particularly when you have so many people who are not taking advantage of the opportunity. It leaves it open for you. Opportunity is not a handout. It's an option to advance, or you can remain the same. But the option is yours, and it's always going to be yours. Taking it means looking at life and seeing how exactly you can make it work for you. The fact of the matter is, America really is an oyster, and the oyster is open. And when you find yourself in these hard times, when you find yourself struggling and thinking about how am I going to make this work? How is this going to happen? I'm telling you, I wish more and more people, instead of allowing the pressures of stress, the worry that will come over you whenever you feel like you got to figure it out on your own, you got to figure it out quickly, all of that leads to distortion, and it's not solution oriented. And what happens is you'll find yourself in a situation where you're making decisions that are not what's best for you in that current situation, simply because of the desperation that has kicked in. Instead, let's take deep breaths. Let's think about what these adjustments are. And let's think about all the ways that we can utilize these new adjustments and utilize this new method in order to ensure that we have what we need. You are not in a crisis. You are in a transition. And knowing the difference can be life or death. And those affected should plan accordingly. You're not in a crisis. You are in a transition. And I'm telling you, changing that, using this is just a transition. I'm adjusting rather than, oh my God, it's a crisis. Oh my God, I'm not going to be able to do this. Oh my God. I'm telling you, that simple mind shift will open up solutions. Take advantage of it. This is your time. Thank you so much for listening to the Janelle King Show. I always enjoy these opportunities. Until next time, stay unafraid, stay unapologetic, and please, please never stop seeking the truth. See you next week.